Throughout this course, I have come to the realization that peoplehood is ultimately a struggle. It is not a struggle that is needlessly difficult or tortuous, quite the contrary. It is a necessary struggle undertaken as a labor of love for one's family and community. Our earlier readings, such as More Than the Sum of Our Rebellions, A New People, and Peoplehood in the Nation Form, help teach us what peoplehood is and how to understand it on an academic level. In our context, it is a community of interrelated people who share a common culture, history, and society. Later literature showed us what peoplehood meant to people such as Maria Campbell, James Brady, Malcolm Norris, the Rhode Allowance people, and the people of Roostertown. To them, it was their community, and it was worth fighting and surviving for. All of these people in some way fought and struggled to hold on to peoplehood and community. Brady and Norris spent their lives trying to fight for their communities. Campbell's book is dedicated to members of her family and community. The people of Roostertown fought against urbanization and alienation just to hold on to the community's strength. The Rhode Allowance people carried community even as they were forced out of their homes. These stories are anything but stories of destitute suffering. They're stories of Metis people who recognized the beauty of their community, culture, families, and did everything they could to support it and fight for it. The term struggle is not disparaging. It's honest in the difficulty of holding on to what is critical to the Metis, even against colonization. Though all our readings may have different lenses, from poetry to autobiography to academic analysis, they ultimately portray the same struggle for determination and strength that many Metis will take up. In the end of all our readings, we are left with someone who has fought or is fighting, and someone who survives against the odds against them. Writings by authors such as Deason Anderson are contemporary examples of Metis people struggling for Metis understanding and perspective. By virtue of their nature as indigenous academics, they've ultimately picked up the struggle for the Metis community. And while the piece More Than the Sum of Our Rebellions gets us to challenge the great men of history narrative, it is important to remember the original Metis resistances are historical artifacts of the long Metis struggle. As stated, struggle can range from academic writing or poetry to the daily fights many Metis have to simply explain what the word Métis means. But each struggle against colonial thought and dominant Western narrative is important to the Métis. As the poem by Catherine Vermette recognized, we can't look for belonging and recognition in the body politic of Canada. It comes from the Métis people of themselves and their struggle. And while we need not look for acceptance in those that rebuke us, it is critical that we fight for who we are and what we stand for as a people and a nation. The Métis Nation is a manifestation of the peoplehood struggle. It is a representation of the Métis body politic and the general will of our people. The nation orients our struggle into collective action and political engagement that is critical to establishing Métis power. This is not to reduce Métis into a monolith, but to distinguish the difference between a peoplehood struggle and a nationhood struggle. The nation ultimately represents the struggle of the people on a regional, national, or international level. Every story, every academic paper, and every Métis person carries in themselves this struggle. They are more than the sum of their parts because they embody the ethic of Métis survival. Métis peoplehood is the community and the families that make up the nation. It is the sum of every action and connection across Canada, and it is worth fighting for because it is a critical and integral part of every Métis person. Through every offensive action taken against the Métis, they have repeatedly failed to destroy, only fracture. As long as there is a struggle, there is survival, and as long as there is survival, there is a Métis people to struggle. I opted to add a few photos of my family because I feel it adds to the theme of Métis survival to depict a family outside of a history book. It's also important to remember that Métis people are not a static entity but a growing community of people. By showing my family, I hope to further prove that the Métis not only continue their struggle against colonialism, racism, possession, but are surviving and thriving.
Life in the Finland.